Today, I'm going to tell you the story of a finance tool from the 1980s that took control of the fate of our industry. Welcome to the Intentional Success Podcast, where we unpack the top strategies, explore business trends, and drill down into best practices to help your live events production business grow and scale on purpose. I'm your host, Tom Stimson. Hey, welcome back, everybody. I've been doing a lot of interviews lately, talking to folks, drudging up old memories, and every once in a while, people ask me what's changed over the years. What's changed in 40 years? When did this start? When did this start? When did that? I get to go down the rabbit hole of memories and make those connections. And it reminds me that one of my favorite authors in a TV series I loved was James Burke's Connection series. And James Burke was a historian and author who used to take fairly what looked trivial and mundane occurrences and developments and trace them forward through history to show why we do things the way we do today. Fun stuff. It's what I love about history is seeing how, learning from the past, how things move forward. And you know what? Sometimes I feel like I'm a little bit of the historian for our industry. So the question is, what's something that we kind of take for granted now that changed our industry? What did it teach us? And I was thinking about this, and I picked lots of moments in time, and I said, you know what, I'm going to do a bunch of podcasts about this. And I'm going to pick some of these pivotal moments and walk through them and show how they got us to where we are today. And more importantly, what can we learn from them? Because it's not enough just to simply be connected. What's the lesson? What can it teach us? And that's what's really important to me. So in my book, Balance, I talk about the death spiral. It's in chapter 2. We get right into it. You've heard me talk about it before. The death spiral occurs when we feel a need to add resources to increase our capacity so that we can sell more. Conversely, advanced sales, if we sell a big event or have a busy month, it triggers us adding resources. When sales dip and all of those resources start to look idle and expensive, well, it's easy. We just drop our prices, sell some more shows, margins shrink, and then we need to buy even more revenue to dig out of that. So we need more revenue, which means we need more gear, we need more people, which means we drop our prices so that we can sell more, and we keep doing that over and over again, and that is the death spiral. So how did we get here? Okay. When did this death spiral start? I tell about all these stories in the 90s about how much money we made, or, what the rental return on a product in the 1980s was. And people were going, oh my goodness, how did you do that? Why can't we do that now? What happened? And we know this because there's competition and there's all this other stuff going on. But what really started it all? And I'm going to tell you, in the late 1980s, phenomenon that went through the early 1990s, a form of equipment leasing was introduced to our sector. It was this exciting new finance tool for people who couldn't get bank financing. Normally, if you wanted to buy equipment, you went to the bank and you got a loan. You showed them the business study, you showed them history of sales, you showed them future sales. Signed contracts were very important to prove that you had these sales. But leases were backed by the equipment that you were buying. It's like buying a car. The car has value that lasts over longer, hopefully, than the term of the loan. These leases were operating leases, and they showed up in our P&Ls as an operating expense rather than on our balance sheet as a debt. And as an operating expense, they reduced operating profit and therefore our income taxes. So you could buy new gear with untaxed money and have no debt on your balance sheet. Who wouldn't jump on this bandwagon, right? It was life-changing for many people. It reduced barriers to entry. So up until that point, equipment companies had great banking relationships. They had cash from somewhere that they used to buy equipment. They kept equipment forever. I mean, the equipment we were using in the 80s, when I was working for companies like Bauer AV, some of that stuff was bought in the 70s. It was ancient. it lasted forever, or at least got used forever. But all of a sudden, companies could go out and buy new equipment one piece at a time on this finance tool called a lease. And it's an operating lease. Now, this was great, right? Lots of company, anybody could become a rental company now. Lots of individuals went out there and bought a couple video projectors and had a little side hustle. Bought a sound system, had a little side hustle. Companies started, rental companies started saying, well, hey, we need a new fleet of video projectors. And video projectors were very new back then and extremely expensive. How are we going to finance this? But if we have them, people will rent from us because other people don't have them. Because this was the era where actually owning a piece of equipment meant that you were going to get the job because your competitor didn't have it. I remember calling my client and say, look, hey, we have this in stock now. Oh, great. Now I can rent it from you, which means I'm going to hire you for the show. Well, what about this other guy who's saying that he just demoed this projector for me? Yes, I know he demoed that projector for you. I rented it to him so he could do a demo. He doesn't own that projector yet. It was my projector. I actually closed deals that way, believe it or not. So reduced barriers to entry. Anyone could play. New companies sprang up. Fantastic for manufacturers. Oh my God, we can sell more equipment. So they sold more gear to more people. This fueled research and development, which led to some pretty amazing products across all departments, all through the 1990s. I mean, the whole digital revolution occurred or started during this period. And this trend of access to equipment spawned the wholesale rental market, right? You have trusted suppliers that you go to right now when you need extra video projectors or a bunch of screens or wireless mics. Those did not exist in 1990 until a little company called VER came, Video Equipment Rentals, a guy in a phone and with his brother in a van, and they changed the industry, right? So this spawned this whole trend of wholesale companies. VER was the first. Other companies came on board. It changed the B2B competitive landscape. It further reduced the barriers to entry because if you couldn't afford to buy or lease the equipment, you could always sub-rent it, and you didn't have to call your competitor to rent gear for the show that you just snagged from them. Everybody thought this was cool, right? But what happened next? Channel disruption. So who's wholesale? Who's direct? What's B2B? Who's an agency? We didn't have any of these words then. We just knew that the farther down in the food chain you were, the lower price you were supposed to pay. So what happens when the agencies, the production companies you were selling to, started to buy gear? What happened when end clients started to buy equipment? Suddenly, everybody's buying equipment. End clients are trying to go to the wholesale company and rent gear. Producers are going to the wholesale company to rent gear. Everybody's angry. This is channel disruption, right? So the channel disruption that we had never experienced, suddenly we were experiencing by the turn of the century every single day. It was a major crisis for a lot of people. At the same time this is going on, there was a convergence of technology between the entertainment world and the AV world, right? I actually come from the entertainment side of the world and I found AV. Many of us come from the AV world and we discovered entertainment. There's a convergence that barely existed in 2000 between these two groups, but suddenly the equipment they were using was the same, right? This made it a lot easier for multiple players to quote on shows, different levels of quality, different approaches. It triggered roll-ups, consolidation. More companies were able to focus on profit. We fell into this whole critical job cost theory thing, is how can we make our profits better by looking at the job cost for every single job. This eventually led us to the end of profitability because we had an oversaturation of equipment and people from entertainment and AV sides of the industry trying to service the same markets, whose business model was hire more people and buy more gear, lower your price if you need to get the job. Wow. However, equipment leasing, which was first secured by the equipment, okay, except that the useful life of the equipment they were financing wasn't as long as the leases were, and we were handing, you know, 3-year-old video projectors back to, or video decks or cameras back to the leasing company, and they are now worth 10 cents on the dollar on the market because there was new product out there that was much better. The finance company stopped doing operating leases and they converted to capital leases. Well, capital leases work differently. They do show up on your balance sheet. It's just normal debt. It's easier to get, but defaults were huge because there aren't banks there with all the rules about who they loan to. Leasing companies didn't have the same rules. So now we got a lot of bad balance sheet going on out there. Now, manufacturers even got into the leasing business because they said, well, wait a minute. If my customers can't get financing, I can't sell these projectors or these speakers or these wireless mics or whatever it is. So they got into the leasing business and partnered with leasing companies. And they signed the original lease and passed it on. They brought a leasing partner in. This was great, but it also helped the wholesale rental companies grow even faster. Now, orders got bigger, for new equipment. The wholesalers got the first shipments of new equipment that guaranteed that that product was going to stay busy for them for at least the first year. The rest of us had to wait, right? All these games are going on. All this channel disruption was going on. And then when the wholesale companies saw dips in revenue or profit, they started to covet their customer's customer, which led to even more channel disruption. Wholesale rental companies doing shows for their clients, which used to be your client. Okay. This crashed the retail, reseller, B2B, wholesale pricing tiers that had separated the players in the supply chain for the previous decades. All of a sudden, pricing no longer mattered, right? Profits everywhere dwindled. So the accountants and the bean counters stepped in and came up with this job cost model that, get this, told us we needed to buy more gear and hire more people to reduce job costs. That was the way to make money. Holy crap. Then, boom. No, it's not what you're thinking. It's the 2007 crash, right? Lives and businesses are wrecked. Government bails out the biggest offenders. Everyone refinances. No one learns anything. By 2009, we were back in business with even smaller margins on our poor little live event technology space. Yeah, we know what happens next. It's 2020. So we experienced a dozen years of shrinking margins to the point where companies were happy to make a 2% net profit in 2019, and then 2020 hits. And this was the lesson that we could not ignore, right? The same financial tool that spawned rapid growth, cooler tech, bigger shows, more profit, was the precursor for all the paper financial instruments such as credit default swaps that brought the worldwide financial crisis down on us in 2007 and 8, right? It also fueled the live event production death spiral. And the lesson here is to never overextend your balance sheet. Don't take on debt you can't guarantee. Don't give credit to the non-credit worthy. Cash flow is always important. Keep your overhead down. Outsource more of the direct delivery. Focus on selling profitable jobs without subsidizing the profit through bad financial decisions like excess debt or overstaffing. In other words, for every one of you, your goal is to find the right balance in your business on how much insourcing, how much outsourcing, and have the systems and processes and tools necessary to run that business for optimum profitability. And this is exactly, sorry, I'm switching to the sales pitch. This is exactly what the members of my intentional success clubs are learning how to do. They learn how to be scalable, how to apply systems and processes to be consistently profitable while growing at a pace they can maintain. They are reducing their risk and volatility and building for the long term. So there you go. That's the story of one minor event that changed our industry forever. Thanks for listening. If you want to find out more about today's episode, go to trstimpson.com/podcast, where you'll find the show notes, related links, and tons of other valuable resources. If you haven't already subscribed to the Intentional Success Podcast, please do so, and I'd greatly appreciate if you would rate and review the show. Also, if you think you might be a good fit to work together or want more information about the Stimson Group, I'd love to hear from you. Visit trstimson.com for more information.